Welcome back to Chaos Corner. It's your old buddy, the guardian of chaos, Big Daddy. And I tell it like it is. I'll say that to say this. Coming to you live to tape from 20 feet below the surface of the earth. Now, welcome back, everyone, from Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, YouTube, and, of course, Facebook. Now, I'm glad you guys are here. We are celebrating our Independence Weekend, the 4th of July weekend. And I want to start off Chaos Corner, show number 47. That's right, 47. We haven't been here in a couple of months, but we're here to bring some levity to our Independence Day weekend. So I want to give a big shout out. First, let me lower the distraction. Coming to you from the bunker. I want to give a big special recognition and shout out to all our military, law enforcement, and first responders. What a weekend. Thank you for serving this country. Thank you for making all of us better people and for our freedoms. And of course, I want to give a special recognition and shout out and condolences to the Patriot Del Wilkes family and friends. Del passed away a couple of days ago. He was a very important part of the community, of the world, of the WWAB podcast network. He affected a lot of people. And I just want to give my thoughts and prayers and a moment of silence and condolences, not only for the WWAB Podcast Network family, but especially for the Patriot Del Wilkes, a salt of the earth human being, and Del's family and friends. So please, before we move on here today, this needs to be said. Rest in peace, Del Wilkes. A moment in silence, please. Del Wilkes, family and friends. God bless you, Del. You're going to be sorely missed. All right, fans, we're here on show number 46, as I said. If you follow me on all social media platforms, and that's Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and my boy Jay Brony over on Facebook, hit the profile link on the Twitter page at Big Daddy GOC. And the GOC stands for the Guardian of Chaos. And that will knock you over to the YouTube channel where you can view Chaos Corner. So again, we recognize what a great weekend this is for our independence and for this country and for the United States. And let's hope we can all rally around and stay safe. And life is not guaranteed and nothing is guaranteed. And we learned that this past week the hard way. Stay close to your family and friends. I know I don't have to say that to you folks out there and what's really important in life. And I didn't come on here after being off for 2 or 3 months on Chaos Corner to spread, be down and to be sullen, because it's a celebration of someone's life who was very important to a lot of people. Now, I didn't know Del that well. I got to know him recently through the WWAB Podcast Network, and I couldn't thank Avi Klein and everyone at the network for Del's incredible podcast, Unmasking the Truth, that was on every Sunday nights with Avi Klein, and of course, the segment with the pastor Andy McDaniel, which is Wrestling with Faith. So I just want to, before we get on to what I really want to cover here, that has to be said, it has to be recognized, and I wanted to put it out there for everyone. And God bless you all. Thank you for being here. And this is a shoot. This is reality. Okay? Before we get on to, some levity and enjoying the weekend and realizing and keeping in retrospect what's really important and who you look to and people around you. And it makes me think and look back in retrospect even more after losing such a man of such conviction and passion and dedication, and a guy who was so brilliant about everything that he touched, and that would be Del Wilkes. So what we're here to do on this episode, I believe it's 46 or 47. We've been off for a couple of months. Cut me some slack. There's nobody down here. Everybody's out at the barbecue, at a picnic. People are at church. People are in the gym. But this is where we left off on episode 46 of Chaos Corner. A complete idiot's guide to pro wrestling. Captain Lou Albano and Burt Randolph Sugar. A match made in heaven. Now, that's what we're going to bring to you here. Listen, as you saw in the opening, I have a cane right here. I have several ice packs. This is not about me, but I just want to show the testicular fortitude and what I want to do for you fans, and how you help me to put out this product, whether I'm injured or not, can barely move or not. I can carry the weight of all of us out there because you guys help me do this. This is what makes me focus and be able to get through the issues that I have right now physically, which, listen, are no big deal. I'll get over it. But I bring this to you fans because this is how I feel. You guys, the people, make me feel like I have nothing going on. Pure, energetic emotion, positive vibes, inspiration, and motivation. So as we're 5 or 6 minutes in here and we open up show number 47, a little solemn, a little celebration, you have to recognize these things and what's going on. And in honor of those that we've lost and our military and first responders and the WWAB Podcast Network and all the different folks out there, I just want to recognize that because, and I mean this from the heart, each and every one of them means so much to me personally. So where we left off last time, fans, we're going to move on to Chapter 7, I believe it is. And you know the different rules here when we cover the book and we do the book reviews here on Chaos Corner. It usually takes us a half an hour, 45 minutes. I think I can manage and get through. Enjoy your family and friends and this weekend and celebrate the 4th of July and keep those close to you. I can't say that enough. Make sure you tell who you need to tell that you love them. Make sure you pick up the phone. Go visit someone. Do something good. Pay it forward or pay it back, however you want to see. I just wanted to put that out there. This is what we're going to cover, Chapter 7, Post-War Wrestlers and the New Pro Wrestling. I'll be reading directly from this and putting my own twist on it. So if you don't like it, change the channel, but I know you won't because this is what I would do if I was the host of the Green Room. This is what you get. I've said it when I did my preview and review shows, so pay attention. Chapter 7, this is where we are. So sit back, again, grab your favorite beverage, have a little snack, put this up on the big screen, re-listen to it, get to it when you have a chance. But listen, it's a 3-day weekend for everyone, so I know that you'll be watching this. Hey, listen, as I said before, this is, and I'm a little emotional, but this is for me as much as it is for you. In this chapter, we're going to talk about Antonina Rocca, wrestling's king of exaggeration. We're going to cover Killer Kowalski, the biggest and baddest baddie of the bunch. We're going to cover Vern Gagne, science and athleticism returns to wrestling. We're going to cover the style and substance of Bruno Sammartino. And then we're going to cover a pack of Prussians, the Von Erichs clan. So let's see if we can roll through here. Show number 47, live to tape, on the pup list, the DL, on the shelf, whatever you want to say. But I will be back. Stay tuned for a lot of big announcements to be announced and to be determined. Whether it be for me at Chaos Corner, whether it be for the WWAB Podcast Network, whether it be for the Green Room, stay tuned. Hit the bell. Comment. Post this. Share it. This is what we're here to do. We're here to do it for you, the fans, and you see the sacrifices that we do. The show must roll on, no matter what it is. Thank you. I get on my soapbox every once in a while. It needs justice. Here we go, fans. We're going to start off. It can't be ignored when George Wagner finally finished his metamorphosis into Gorgeous George. Pro wrestling as we know it today was born. And waiting in the wings were athletes from all over the world, ready to take the sport all the way back to bright lights and screaming fans. With the post-war crop of wrestlers, whole new dimensions and excitement and action were explored. These, then, are the men who brought wrestling into the television age, and this chapter will tell you all about them. We'll start off with Antonina Rocca. Wrestlers are given to exaggerations. Everything is the best, the biggest, or the worst. But no one ever engaged in exaggerations like Antonina Rocca, the self-described greatest wrestler in the world. And if wrestling is a world of make-believe, it's only fitting that it has sometimes like Antonina Rocca and someone like him who was himself unbelievable. Take the time he told an interviewer with a straight face that he had once wrestled 17 Chavante Indians. 17. Giving each and every one of them a broken arm with his fearsome wrist lock. Any ethnologist could tell you that no more than one or two of these natives of the American rainforest have ever even been close enough to civilization to even see a Coca-Cola bottle. But this was Rocca's story, and he stuck to it. Beginnings from Amazonia. What few facts can be pieced together, Rocca indicate that he was born in Treviso, Italy, sometime around 1923. Was christened Antonina Biaston, if I'm saying that. Biaston. Biassetton. I think I got that right. And immigrated with his parents to Buenos Aires when he was about 15. That was 1938. What happened between then and 1947, we can only guess at. But to hear Rocca tell it, he was by turns a track star, a fencing great, a master rugby player. You name it, he claimed it. He claimed to have done it, that's for sure. In 1947, while wrestling, who knew he'd stumble onto something potentially big? And that would be Nick Illich, called Dr. Carl Sarpalis, a wrestling promoter in Texas, and described Rocca's barefooted antics, leaps, flying moves, drop kicks. After listening to 10 minutes of ravings, Sarpalis told Illich to put Rocca on a plane pronto. This is history, fans. Remember something about the book here. A Complete Idiot's Guide to Pro Wrestling. A Match Made in Heaven. Captain Lou Albano and Burt Randolph Sugar. And I don't have to read you their resumes. They're two legends. Go back on the channel here and listen to the other shows, and you'll see what I'm talking about covering this book. But remember, this book was written and published and released in 1999. Over 20 years ago. And the reason why I put this out here now is because this is as relevant as when it was written over two decades ago as it is today. And you'll see that as I forge on here with the book. And I bet you I have lent out this book at least 100 times over the 20 plus years. And I've probably read it myself at least 25 times. Speaking of exaggerations in Antonina Rocca, let's get back to the task at hand. We already covered the beginnings of Amazonia, and we talked about Dr. Carl Sarpalis. We talked about Nick Illich. He was spotted by a tourist. That's who found Antonina Rocca. Put him on a plane pronto. Let's go to one of the sidebars in the comments here in the book. We have Bert's Corner. We have Captain Lou's Corner, and you're here on Chaos Corner. We have something called WrestleMania. We have other segments in here that we're going to cover. And these are just little outtakes and tidbits of the book here in Chapter 7. This is entitled WrestleMania. The dropkick has been around since the 1930s, when it was first introduced by Gus Sonnenberg, and Rocca renewed its popularity with a whole new generation of fans. But even Rocca couldn't equal the feats of a wrestler named Marvin Mercer. Mercer could deliver his own variation called the atomic dropkick, and land back on his feet like a circus acrobat. Pretty impressive stuff, even back to the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. Fans, these are the folks that paved the way for what you watch and what you do and how you perform today. History in the making. Rocca planted his size 13 feet on American soil in June of 1947, with a thump that would be heard around the wrestling world. For the next 13 plus years, he would remake the sport. Rocca's aerial athleticism, all of Rocca's moves were soon on display. His mid-air splits, his leaps from the top rope onto the shoulders of his opponents, he'd ride them around like a jockey at the local racetrack. And his Argentine backbreaker, he actually made 2 debuts. The first was in Houston against Lord Blears. Tally-ho! The second came after he listened to the blandish statements of New York promoter Toots Mott, talk about history, who brought him to Brooklyn's Ridgewood Grove in 1948 to face Benito Gardini. Gardini recalled the experience this way. When he started flying at me out of nowhere, I was shocked. First thing I knew, he's running toward me. Then he disappeared, and wham! I got those big bare feet in the face. And then when I get up, he gets me in the chest. Wham! It's like running into a battering ram. As if that weren't bad enough, Gardini suffered another indignity. He jumps onto the ring post. I think he's running away, but no. He comes sailing toward me like a big bird, and the next thing I know, I'm carrying him around on the ring on my shoulders, with his legs locked around my head so I could hardly breathe. Let's get down to Bert's Corner as a sidebar here, fans. The 247-pound, well-proportioned Rocca would wow the crowds with his pre-bout antics, sometimes going into the ring, dropping to the mat, and doing 200 to 300 push-ups before the bout even started. Single-footedly, Rocca became wrestling's greatest gate attraction during its golden age. His gravity-defying acrobatics and his challenge that no human could get out of his Argentine backbreaker stirred the imagination of wrestling fans everywhere and brought them out in record numbers, revitalizing the once moribund New York wrestling scene, especially energizing the city's large Latino population. There's a lot to be said for that. Promoter Toots Mott crowed, Rocca has done more for legs than Betty Grable. And Rocca's mere presence ensured a packed house. His matches against Gene Stanley at Madison Square Garden in 1949 and 1950 drew the biggest gates of the era. In 1950, he was picked by the East Coast Wrestling Brain Trust as the man to beat the giant Primo Carnera after the latter had won 321 consecutive bouts and became the biggest drawing card in wrestling. Despite Rocca's popularity, some scoffed at his style. One of those was Lou Thez. He called Rocca's wrestling just slapping with feet. Thez beat Rocca at least 3 times, though Rocca would always claim he'd never been beaten. Detractors or no, Rocca went on his merry way. He loved the spotlight and the adulation of the fans, even though Mott was probably helping himself to 2/3 of Rocca's purses. Money for those out there. Rocca was satisfied with his adoring fans, an attendant to open doors for him, and a limo for the ride back to his hotel. I can still remember seeing him as he waltzed into the offices of Mott and Vince McMahon Sr., a camel hair coat thrown over his large shoulders, a big cigar in his hand, and an ear-to-ear smile on his face. He was fully prepared to be oohed and awed over. And when his star began to wane, he teamed up with another Latino favorite, Puerto Rican star Miguel Perez, to form a popular and lucrative tag team partnership. He said, there are more than 500,000 Puerto Ricans in New York. These people needed a hero, a symbol to look up to and cheer. By teaming with Perez, I became that symbol. That's what Rocca says. Let's go to Captain Lou's Corner for a sidebar. Ironically, here on Chaos Corner. Another acrobatic star of the 1950s was Ricky Starr, who had studied ballet and put in his training to use in the wrestling ring. He danced around on ballet slippers and delivered shots of what they call a Bolshoi ballet maneuver. Say that 3 times fast. Bolshoi ballet maneuver. His combination of skills in both dance and wrestling made him a very colorful attraction. Unbelievable. Antonino Rocca. Let's move on to another legend from right here in the Northeast New England area. This is what you get when the Guardian of Chaos would be a host anywhere. A podcast, TV, radio, film, movies, the Green Room, the WWAB network. This is what you get when you get the Guardian of Chaos. On the pup list, physically unable to perform list, on the shelf, if you will, I'll still get it done. Let's move on to the task at hand, fans. Show number 47, live to tape, here from Chaos Corner, reviewing, previewing, going over book review. Burt Randolph Sugar, Captain Lou Albano, Idiot's Guide to Pro Wrestling, a match made in heaven. The foreword on this book was by one Tommy Dreamer. Talk about a guy in longevity and who has a lot of influence in the business, whether it be Impact Wrestling, ECW Original, his own hardcore podcast, or Busted Open Radio. Tommy Dreamer's quite the guy in longevity who's made a career for himself, a legend, in my opinion, a guy who should be a Hall of Famer soon. Speaking of Hall of Famers, a gentleman that I happen to be a legend, if you will, an icon I happened to be in the ring with when I was managing Jackmaster John Diamond and Big Rick Fuller. I took the double axe handle from this man, and that would be one Killer Kowalski. If only one legend could represent professional wrestling, it might be Killer Kowalski. No other wrestler has ever been more intimidating than the Killer. He was feared, reviled, and despised. Adjectives used to describe him include vicious, tough, mean, ruthless, rough, and destructive. Tall, almost Lincoln-esque compared to the huge wrestlers of his day, the homicidal-looking Kowalski more than made up for it in his lack of wrestling heft by using whatever methods were at hand or foot to win. Regardless of the rules, his arsenal included biting, kicking, gouging, and clawing. In short, anything it took to disable an opponent. His most famous maneuver was the notorious throat stomp. Delivered by landing on his opponent's Adam's apple, one foot landed on the throat, the other simultaneously thumped on the floor with equal force to heighten the effect but lessen the impact. Even acknowledging the special effects, the impact of the move was horrific. Ask Vern Gagne, who explained what it felt like. Vern Gagne talking. I was on the floor and he just jumped up in the air and landed feet first on my windpipe. Gagne tried to explain to author Joe Jarris in a strained voice. It knocked the breath out of me, Gagne said. It's a pretty rough hold if his aim isn't just right. And one night, it wasn't. Which is where the legend of Killer Kowalski began. That was the night in Montreal in 1954, when the Killer ripped off Yukon Eric's ear in a bout at the Forum. Talk about history in the making. That's right here on Chaos Corner for show number 47. Kowalski's cauliflower incident. Yukon Eric's ear wasn't just any ear. It was a cauliflower ear. And fans, you know what that's all about, right? I know that you know that. An ear so large and calcified by the many blows it had received that it was barely attached to Eric's head. It was an inviting target for Kowalski as he mounted the top rope and leaped on his prostrate, that's what it says, his prostrate opponent for his famous throat stomp. He missed his landing. His heel grazed Eric's head and he pinned the ear to the mat. Eric tried to twist free, but by twisting, he merely severed his calcified ear in the process. Kowalski fought his way back to the dressing room through a hostile crowd, their chorus of boos blending with the wail of an ambulance siren outside. Of the ear, Kowalski merely said, it was so cauliflowered, it would have fallen off by itself if it had a chance to. But the fans wouldn't have any of Kowalski's rationalizations. And when he returned to the Forum the next week, a record crowd of over 14,000 fans, incensed fans, greeted him with jeers, chanting, "Le Killer! Le Killer!" Pretty interesting stuff. Legends. These are the stories, fans, that are out there in the IWC, if you will. We're 23 minutes in. Let's take a quick break here. I got to adjust the ice pack. Let me stay hydrated. Doc is telling me I got the MRI coming up, fans. I just want to let you know that. We're all good. We got the MRI coming up in a couple weeks. Hydrate, especially with the heat wave out west. The weather's been crazy, 90s to the 60s. Independence Day here on the 4th of July weekend with your old buddy, the Guardian of Chaos. And I tell it like it is. I'll say that to say this. Let's get back to Chapter 7, Complete Idiot's Guide to Pro Wrestling. Okay, here we are. Let's get back. We were talking about Killer Kowalski and the fans chanting "Le Killer" up in the Montreal Forum. The toughest man of all. His name soon became legendary, and he was in demand throughout the world. Everyone wanted to see the man who, decked out in his unique purple tights with lightning bolts on both sides and his glittering gold boots, had severed a man's ear from his head. Ask any wrestler of the era who his toughest opponent was, and they'll all come back with the same answer: Killer Kowalski. Bruno Sammartino, who wrestled them all, said, and I quote Bruno Sammartino, "I've wrestled many tough men in my career, but no one was as vicious, as rough, or as tough as Killer. What motivated this man, you may ask? His philosophy on wrestling was, I would use anything in my power to knock my opponent into submission. Only winners make the big bucks. And I was determined to be a winner, Kowalski said. In life outside the wrestling ring, Killer Kowalski was a winner too. He was a soft man who read, painted, took photographs, and went on religious retreats. Outside, he could be a perfect gentleman, but inside the ring, Killer Kowalski was anything but. And I'll use my phrase. He was no one to be trifled with. And how important, and I'll put this out there, is it to have your faith, your family, your friends, that network of positivity, motivation, inspiration. That's the most important thing in this world. And that's the most important thing that's going on in the status of this world in the current day of 2021 here on the 4th of July weekend. Think about that, fans. Stay strong. Stay with each other. Network with your circle of friends who have the same beliefs and moral convictions and be for the better good. Don't be a part of the problem. Be a part of the solution and stay true to yourself. I don't have to say that, but since I have a platform, I put it out there. Let's get on to A Match Made in Heaven, a complete idiot's guide to pro wrestling. So we're talking about Killer Kowalski, again, one tough SOB, and again, I've had experiences with Killer, his influence here in the Northeast New England area, and all the different people he's trained onto stardom, and the people that he's impacted and motivated in this area and throughout the whole world in this country is unbelievable. Killer Kowalski. And again, I've had a chance to be in the ring with him years ago, and had a chance to be at his school and to see a lot of different people, and been in touch with a lot of his people that he trained, his workers, who are unbelievable. There's nothing like the legend of Killer Kowalski. Fans, we're going to move on to Verne Gagne. Just when it seemed that all wrestling's technicians had disappeared entirely, chased out by the showman, a wrestler with the striking features of a Viking god, and going by the name of Verne Gagne, came onto the scene to evoke comparisons with the great wrestlers of yore. Gagne knew the intricacies and subtleties of wrestling, having been the 4-time Big Ten wrestling champion, twice the NCAA champion, and a member of the 1948 Olympic squad. Add to this were his impressive credentials as a football player at the University of Minnesota, where he starred as a halfback and played in the 1949 College All-Star Game, and you had the makings of a hell of an athlete and a hell of a wrestler. Stand by, fans. Let me adjust the ice packs. Thank you, thank you. From college to the canvas mat, Gagne considered a career in pro football first, saying that the world of professional wrestling was too rough and show-offish for me. I was the typical college type, Gagne said. Then, fast and purely scientific. All the extra frills and gaudiness of pro wrestling gave me the wrong impression at first, Gagne said. But he turned his back on a promising career in football to become a pro wrestler. There were those who didn't think he'd make it at first. One was Minneapolis promoter Tony Stetcher. Brother of the great Joe Stetcher, Tony wasn't impressed, thinking the then 195-pound Gagne too light for a good wrestler. Still, he put Gagne in against Abe Cashy in April 1949 for his pro wrestling debut. Gagne won the match but failed to win over Stetcher, who still harbored doubts about the ability of this great college wrestler to make it in the professional ranks. So Gagne headed out for Texas, where he struck the proverbial oil, selling out every arena in the area. As Gagne recalled it, promoters all over the world heard of my success in Texas. It was the turning point. By the time he returned to his home base of Minneapolis, Gagne had discovered the meaning of showmanship, adding, and I realized that to be a good showman was a lot more difficult than to be a good wrestler. Point well taken. The combination of good wrestling and showmanship made him a crowd favorite, and a winning one at that. He took the NWA Junior Heavyweight title just a year and a half after his debut against Cashy. This was just the beginning for the appealing wrestler with the well-chiseled good looks and equally well-chiseled moves. Gagne moved up to the heavyweight ranks, and by the end of 1951, he was wrestling the top names in the field, including the legendary Lou Thesz. Let's get on to the sidebar of Bert's Corner. The very few scientific wrestlers in recent years all learned their trade as college wrestlers and can be counted on the fingers of one hand. The very short list includes Vern Gagne, Danny Hodge, Dr. Bill Miller, Bob Backlund, and Ric Flair. Pretty interesting list. Their bout on October 27th, 1951 in Milwaukee for the NWA title was what old-timers would call a wrestler's wrestling match. Many called it the greatest bout of modern times, one which reminded many who saw the famous Jim Londos Strangler Lewis match back in Madison Square Garden in 1932. The quest for the title. The Gagne-Thesz match was science versus science, as each got a quick start out of both blocks. Both took one fall in the best 2 out of 3 championship match. Both pulled out all the stops in the third and deciding fall. Gagne was trying to work Thesz into his special sleeper hold, and Thesz tried mightily to execute his own pet move, the reverse body slam. Neither succeeded. Each knew exactly what the other one had in mind, so the match ended in one of those rarities of modern wrestling. Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? A draw. Gagne would eventually win the U.S. heavyweight title in September of 1953 and keep it for 31 months until he was topped by Wilbur Snyder in April of 1956. He would win the title for a second time in April of 1958 by beating Dick the Bruiser in Chicago. But it was the world title that Gagne thirsted for. This was that Lou Thesz seemed to be constantly winning and losing in alternate bouts. In 1959, Gagne finally beat Edouard Carpentier, who had himself beaten Thesz to gain the NWA title. However, several members of the NWA chose to ignore Carpentier's to ignore Carpentier and therefore Gagne's claim to the title. Instead, continued to recognize only Thesz. That's where the confusion was. Fed up, Gagne tucked his title belt under his arm and walked, forming the American Wrestling Alliance, the AWA, in 1960. As Gagne himself explains his defection from the NWA, he says, "I won the belt from Edouard Carpentier. He won over Lou Thesz, the NWA champion." Many promoters felt that Thesz was getting himself disqualified too often so that he could hold on to his title. The belt doesn't change hands in a disqualification. We all know that. A group of them got together and said if he got disqualified against Carpentier in their match, then Carpentier would be awarded the title. And that's exactly what happened. Whatever the reason, Gagne now owned the belt, which traced its ancestry all the way back to Frank Gotch. And now a new wrestling circuit, the AWA, was formed, covering a territory which extended from Indianapolis on the east through Chicago, Milwaukee, and Minneapolis, all the way to Omaha and Denver in the west. For the next 2 decades, the American Wrestling Alliance would ride on Vern Gagne's broad back and on the title belt that he held. By the time he retired in the early 80s, Gagne had built a legacy. He'd also brought in a group of new wrestlers and taught them the ropes, including, but not limited to, Bob Backlund, Ric Flair, Ken Patera, and Ricky Steamboat, among countless others. Now that's history, Vern Gagne, the AWA. We move on to a living legend. May he rest in peace also, Bruno Sammartino. We all know that. A living legend, Bruno Sammartino. We know the history that I was able to take office from Bruno Sammartino and be commissioner. One of the highlights of my career. Rest in peace, Bruno. It was a long... It has been something of a bar argument over who was the greatest in wrestling history. A pub argument, a restaurant, over a diner, a cup of coffee. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bar, although we've done that many times too. Some gray beards will inevitably bring up the names of Gotch or Hackenschmidt, while others will pull out yellowing newspaper clippings to invoke the names of Strangler Lewis, Jim Londos, or Lou Thez. But for the wrestling fan of the 60s, there's only one name, Bruno Sammartino, who was called by promoter Vince McMahon Sr. the greatest athlete as well as the greatest wrestler of all time. However noble his standing in the minds of wrestling fans, the legend of Bruno Sammartino was anything but noble in its beginnings. Born in raids in Abruzzi and Molise regions of northern Italy, up in the Apennine Mountains, young Bruno and his family endured the hardships of World War II and the Nazi occupation of the area. Stand by, fans. Stand by. His father had gone to America before the war, and communication there was non-existent. Other members of the family were killed, and the rest subsisted on whatever they could find. Foraging for grass under deep snows, and once living off the carcass of a dead horse for 2 months. Coming to America. After the war, Bruno's father was finally able to make contact with the family back in Italy. He had settled in Pittsburgh and wrote, "You're coming to America." The land of opportunity. Boy, have things changed since then. Bruno, then age 13, packed up and headed for America with the rest of his family. They boarded a cargo ship in Naples and were locked in the hull of the boat. When they arrived in New York, they were quarantined with the rest of the passengers for TB. Finally released, they traveled to Pittsburgh to join Sammartino Sr. Bruno took one look at his father's cold water flat and said incredulously, "This is the land of opportunity." But the 13-year-old Sammartino would soon find out that indeed it was, for shortly after his arrival, the 67-pound youngster was introduced to weight training. By the time he was 18, he weighed 257 pounds. He could bench press 565 pounds 38 times consecutively. And he had won the title of Mr. Pennsylvania. Talk about legends and what we're covering right here on show 47 of Chaos Corner. Wow. The first time I laid eyes on Bruno at a gym right off 8th Avenue in New York where wrestlers go, I was impressed by his brute strength as he lifted weights, and by his size, his brawny arms, his massive chest, and his shoulders, which always looked like you could serve them to a sit-down dinner for 6. The source of his then 6-foot, 270-pound body was his exercise regimen, his diet, and his refusal to take any sort of drugs, especially steroids. Stand by, fans, stand by. He caught the eye of Vince McMahon Sr., too. McMahon was then planning to establish his own wrestling circuit, independent of the then-dominant NWA. He decided that Bruno would be the perfect man to head the new organization's assault on both the NWA and the East Coast establishment. Stand by, fans, stand by. Let me get a little hydration in here. Thanks for being here. I hope you're enjoying it. We're 38 minutes in. Again, happy 4th of July, happy Independence Day, and a big shout-out to all my family and friends, and, of course, to all my family and friends over at the WWAB Podcast Network, The Green Room, and, of course, my thoughts and prayers in the passing of the Patriot, Del Wilkes. Stand by, fans. We're almost 40 minutes in here of episode 47. Live to tape, down here, 20 feet below the surface of the Earth, on the disabled list with the Guardian of Chaos. This is what keeps me going. You, the fans, bringing you this history, this kind of information on this platform. Let's get back to a complete idiot's guide to pro wrestling. Here we go. Moving up with the McMahon machine. By 1963, a great year. 1963 was really an unbelievable year. Perhaps the best of all time. Bruno was headlining in New York. The fans rejoiced in his strength and brawling, and Bruno, the Tower of Power, rewarding their support with win after win. Then McMahon decided to make his move on the NWA. When Lou Thesz beat NWA World Champion Buddy Rogers in one fall in January of 1963, McMahon broke away from the NWA to form the WWF, continuing to recognize Rogers as the champion, but Rogers' title was only temporary. And it wasn't the WWF, it was the WWWF. So the book even misprinted it. It was the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, which is what I grew up on, and then the NWA. I'd have to say both at the same time. So here we go. On May 17th of that year, 1963, Sammartino pinned and injured Rogers in less than a minute in a bout at Madison Square Garden, the Mecca. Honor and integrity, the Sammartino hallmark. Bruno's reign as champion was to last for 8 long years, during which time he defended the title successfully against the likes of Gene Kiniski, Killer Kowalski, Lou Thesz, Ray Stevens, John Tolos, Johnny Valentine, Classy Freddie Blassie, Dr. Bill Miller, Professor Teru Tanaka, and Waldo Von Erich. Finally, on January 18th, 1971, Bruno lost his title to the Russian Bear Ivan Koloff in a controversial match, and afterward went into semi-retirement. After 10 months out of the ring, he was back, and he retook the title from Stan Stasiak by the end of the year. Stan the Man Stasiak. You remember the heart punch, right? I think Ox Baker had a much better heart punch than Stan the Man Stasiak. I had a chance to meet both legends. I'll go with Ox Baker. During his second go-round as champion, Bruno suffered a serious injury, a broken neck in the title bout against Big Stan Hansen. And fans, if you haven't seen that one, go back and check out the feud from the 70s and 80s with Bruno and Stan the Lariat Hansen. Many feared that Bruno was permanently damaged, but the man who had always gone from strength to strength overcame his injury. In a rematch against Hansen, a wild brawl-filled bout at Shea Stadium. Remember the Shea Stadium series? There were 4 big cards at Shea Stadium in the 70s into the early 80s. Fans, go back and check those out. History in the making. We talk about Stan Hansen, okay? Shea Stadium. This is where Bruno evened the score by thoroughly thrashing this man that he believed had intentionally injured him. I remember it like yesterday. Bruno would lose the crown a second time in a controversial bout with superstar Billy Graham at Baltimore Civic Center in 1977. And although many in the audience were watching the bout on TV at home that Graham stole the title, this is what they thought, Bruno never once complained about the outcome. Now, fans, I remember watching this in 1977. I was barely a teenager. Unbelievable history. This gives me chills. Goosebumps is what this brings back to me. That was the hallmark of Bruno Sammartino. He was a man who carried himself without insolence and without boasting. His words and actions were steel true and blade straight. Bruno was never afraid to say what he believed, and many the time that his relations with the WWF were somewhat less than cordial because he always said what he thought. Maybe this is why he captured the hearts and minds of so many wrestling fans during the 60s into the 70s. Unbelievable story, Bruno Sammartino. We move forward to the Von Erich saga. The biography of Fritz Von Erich in the fall of 1959 issue of Wrestling Review began with Nazi Germany was on its last legs. Before long, Russian and American flags would fly over Berlin, and a guy named Hitler would make an ass of himself. Meanwhile, however, discipline for both soldiers and civilians was hard. One day, between air raids, a battalion of infantry passed an almost deserted playground. Several boys were lifting weights, oblivious to the carnage going on about them. One of the lads caught the Prussian officer's eye. He halted his unit. "You, the big one, come here," he shouted. The big one walked over slowly. The officer sneered. "Here, have to put up with rabbles like this," he pointed to these men, "while specimens like you are wandering around. You're big enough to be in the army. Why aren't you?" But the tall blonde boy never flinched. He said, "I'm only 14 years old, sir." The bio would go on to recount how the Prussian officer took a swipe at the boy with his swagger stick and how the 14-year-old tore the stick away and threw the officer to the ground. It would tell of how one observer, a corporal, looked up the youngster after the war and pleaded with him to recapture our physical prestige by becoming a wrestler. To this, the boy is said to have answered, "I'm going to America to wrestle. I'm going to cripple every schweinhund of American wrestler I meet. Single-handed, I will continue the war against the Yankees." And now for the real story. There's only one problem with this story. Fritz von Erich was in reality Jack Atkinson, a tough 6'4", 260-pounder who had played football for Southern Methodist University, yes, SMU, back in 1948 and 1949, and had probably never been closer to Germany than Paris, Texas. How about that? An unbelievable read, fans. Go out and I implore you to get this book. I don't care how old it is. I don't care how old you are. I implore you to go out and get this book. I really do. So here we go. But in the immediately post-World War II era, being a German was visual, shorthanded for being a villain. And Atkinson entered the wrestling arena as the quintessential villain. His longtime partner, Cowboy Bill Watts, and the German gimmick was a natural. With that scowl of his, he was an easy guy to hate. Equally easy was his selection of a German moniker. He borrowed the name Fritz from a member of his family, and Eric was his mother's maiden name. As he traveled the state of Texas and beyond, he developed yet another gimmick, his deadly iron claw. Ooh, grip. And Atkinson, Von Erich, if you will, soon converted his iron claw into an iron grip on wrestling in and around Dallas, developing the World Class Championship Wrestling, or WCCW, which soon became a family enterprise as he brought in 5 of his 6 sons to become part of the family show. Wow. The Von Erichs, David, Kerry, Kevin, Mike, and Chris, soon became the hottest thing to hit Texas in salsa. And the WCCW caught fire along with them. World class, we'll say. There's a couple of typing errors in this book. You might have to go back and republish it. Let me adjust here, fans. Bear with me. I appreciate it. Listen, we're coming up on 47 minutes. We may go an hour. They played to full houses at the Sportatorium with occasional superstar extravaganzas at the Cotton Bowl at Texas Stadium. The weekly WCCW TV shows were syndicated in 66 U.S. television markets, Japan, Argentina, and the Middle East. That's why World Class became so worldwide. Do you get that? I think that you do. Tragedy in the second generation as we move on here, fans. I don't like dead air. There was like 5 seconds there right now. But in the 1980s, tragedy in the second generation, as this is called. But in the 1980s, the Von Erich success story turned suddenly tragic. David, probably the best wrestler of the bunch, I had to contemplate that, died during a 1984 tour of Japan. The rumored cause was a drug overdose, but the official word was that he'd suffered an intestinal hemorrhage. In his honor, a gigantic David Von Erich memorial show was staged at Texas Stadium. It was an unbelievable. Go back and check out that card too, friends. A couple of years later, a second Von Erich brother, Mike, had a close brush and death involving drugs. Close brush. But Fritz told anyone who would listen that Mike suffered from toxic shock syndrome. It was impossible to mask his condition, and the Von Erichs had to resort to having him score one punch or single drop kick wins to cover up his inability to perform for long in the ring. In 1987, Mike committed suicide, and again, a memorial show was staged, this time honoring both David and Mike at the Texas Stadium, and, as with the earlier memorial show, the stadium was jammed with fans. Now, I don't have to tell you fans this, but I'll remind you of it. You can go out and watch Dark Side of the Ring. It's very well laid out on Vice about the tragedy of the Von Erichs and the successes of the Von Erichs, or the A&E compilation of what they're doing. You see what's going on in mainstream media right now, whether it's A&E with the documentaries, whether it's Vice TV and Dark Side of the Ring. Pro wrestling is on almost 7 nights a week, including pay-per-views. Look at all the competition and podcasts and all the different television channels. There's a lot going on in the industry, even today, and here we are back in the 80s talking about this. With Mike's death, it fell to Kerry on the Von Erich banner. By this time, ESPN had begun broadcasting Texas wrestling, and Kerry quickly became a favorite on the show. Kerry battled Ric Flair, winning and then losing the World Class and NWA championships. But tragedy stalked Kerry, too. Soon after losing the title to Flair, Kerry was involved in a motorcycle accident in which he severely dislocated his right ankle. Recovery and return to glory. Nobody wanted to see Kevin and Chris wrestle. The fans wanted Kerry. The Greek godlike features and flowing blonde hair. Without a wrestling son to pump up attendance, promoter Fritz Von Erich had to resort to trickery to punch up his weekly TV show ratings, including a fake heart attack with an ambulance and all. Now, what Von Erich was really over the top. Recovery took another year this time. Kerry had come back sporting an artificial foot. The TV announcers, unaware they had lost a limb, said Kerry hasn't lost a step, and to most observers, he hadn't. Having becoming so adept at wrestling on one foot and having learned to spend as much time as possible hanging on to the ropes, Kerry made it all but impossible for the fans to detect any difference in this post-accident prowess. Rumors circulated that something was wrong, very wrong with his foot, fueled in part by his refusal to remove his wrestling boots in public. But Kerry was so adroit in hiding his injury that Vince McMahon hired him away from World Class and introduced him to the WWF as the Texas Tornado. With his departure from World Class, there was no remaining big attraction, and the crowds at the Sportatorium began to dry up. With that, ESPN dropped its weekly World Class show. Death, drugs, and a disaster. Tragedy continued to stalk the Von Erich clan. In 1991, 21-year-old Chris committed suicide. Then Kerry ran afoul of the law and was caught forging prescriptions for drugs to ease his constant pain, facing jail time. Kerry followed his brothers, Mike and Chris, taking his own life in 1993. Finally, the patriarch of the family, Fritz, succumbed to his brain cancer in August of 1998. The first family of professional wrestling was all gone but for Kevin. Recently, a wrestling writer traveled down to Dallas to visit the one-time shrine of the Von Erich family, the Dallas Sportatorium, where World Class once held its weekly wrestling shows. He found the once proud arena under newer management, with some hint of a, porno operation going on just outside and down the road. Who knows? All traces of the Von Erichs were gone. All that remains are the fans' memories of Jack Atkinson as Fritz Von Erich, and the sun god good looks for Kerry when he was in his prime as the pride of the Southwest. The least you need to know here from Chapter 7, show number 47, live to tape, covering a complete idiot's guide to pro wrestling by Captain Lou Albano and Burt Randolph Sugar. Antonita Rocca's spectacular leaps in the ring added an airborne element to wrestling's magic. Killer Kowalski brought new meaning to the term bad when he snapped off Yukon Eric's cauliflower ear. Vern Gagne was a pure athlete, but his showmanship was second to none. Bruno Sammartino returned class, style, and substance to pro wrestling. The Von Erichs were and remain wrestling's first family of wrestlers. So, fans, that wraps up what I wanted to cover here today for some entertainment, to put out there for content, to be creative, to bring you fans some levity and entertainment, especially for all the emotions that are going through a lot of different people out there and that we're praying for, and on this special 4th of July weekend. And I just want to thank everyone for being here, and we'll be back for Chaos Corner, and hopefully we'll get a few more shows in. This was show number 47. I fought through a lot to get through this, but I want to implore you fans to stay positive, to stay upbeat, to stay full of faith, to be informed, to walk with positive inspiration and giving back to other people. I don't want to be on a soapbox. I don't come on here to talk religion or politics or anything like that, or slam. I don't do any of that. I come on here to give positivity and inspiration and motivation, not only for you and everyone watching, but for myself. It really is. And I can't thank you fans enough from the bottom of my heart. And we're all going to get through this. We are. Have faith, trust, be positive, bring in that energy, get rid of anyone that's toxic or negative in your life. It's not what you need. It's too short. Nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed. We all know that. Hold on to everyone that you love tightly. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And I can't thank you enough for being here and having a little fun with me. And go out and pick up this book. It really is unbelievable, and I'll continue to cover it. We're on page 96 of whatever 340 pages. And in the next chapter, which is chapter 8, we're going to be covering today's stars. And remember when the book was written. Remember the time frame. This is 1999, 2000, the turn into the 21st century here. And in that chapter of what you'll watch and what you'll listen to when I bring it to you, it's going to be wrestling's baby boomer generation, personas and pop culture icons, a background and bios of the finest first cable era wrestlers. We're going to cover that on chapter 8. I can't wait. Who knows when I'll do it? I may be back down today. I may do it tomorrow. Who knows? After the MRI, I'll come down here and do it. It doesn't matter. Thank you for all the well wishes and being here, fans. I wanted to make sure that I got this up to about an hour. I'm going to put it up on YouTube, and I'll put it up on Facebook, Instagram, and on all the social media platforms. Spread it around. Have some fun with it. It's true history. It really is, and I had a lot of fun. And again, I am the guardian of chaos, Big Daddy, and I tell it like it is. And I'll say that to say this. Don't you dare miss Chaos Corner. And again, we're going to bring it out here for a moment of silence for the Patriot Del Wilkes, the WWAB podcast family, the Green Room family, and of course the family of the Patriot himself, Del Wilkes. Rest in peace, brother. Rest in peace. I know I didn't know you, but I knew of you, and we had exchanges. And you knew Jay Brony, Del. You liked Jay Brony, so I like that. Godspeed. Moment of silence on our way out of here. Episode 47. I can't thank you fans enough. A moment of silence for the Patriot Del Wilkes. God bless. Good night. And don't you dare miss it.